Hey folks, welcome back to Tommy Highway TV, home of the Common Sense Network. I, as always, am your host, Tommy Highway, and we are live this evening. We've got a really special show planned for you. In fact, I've got I've got one guest, one of my main man, my usual guest. We also got a special guest this evening, and we're going to go ahead and go through several subjects that are the burning questions of our time, let's say. But before we get into this, I want to go ahead and really extend a special thanks to all the first responders that are out there and all the medical people that are on the front lines of this disease, of this virus that's ravaging, our major population centers.
Right. Exactly.
Those people have a lot of guts. They're getting out there, they're getting it done. And, we really appreciate that. It's not just the first responders, not just the medical people, but also the delivery people. We're talking about like the truck drivers that are running back and forth and they're replenishing the stock that we just burned through in our stores. I'm talking about even down to the pizza guy or girl, okay? Those are the people right now that are sustaining a lot of Americans that simply don't have the ability to get out, can't get out, or can't cook. What do? You order a pizza. Those people are taking a great deal of risk at this point. And I just wanted, from the bottom of my heart and from everybody that works on the Tommy Highway TV channel to extend our thanks to them. And Tim, I understand that you had a video that you wanted to go ahead and roll for this.
Yeah, I'll bring it right up.
Thank you.
You got to bring it up, Tommy.
Right.
Appreciating the heroes of this crisis. Of course, nurses and doctors risking their own health to protect ours, but also the hospital cleaners and the truck drivers and shelf stackers. They are the ones literally keeping America going. And it was another week of strong action by the president in the war against coronavirus. Just today, as we saw, announcing the extension of the slow the spread guidelines until April the 30th. Putting together the biggest and quickest rescue plan for workers, families, and small businesses in American history, cutting red tape and getting a 15-minute coronavirus test FDA approved, deploying FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers to build a hospital in New York in a week, with many more to come around the country, invoking the Defense Production Act to get the ventilators our hospitals need, and appointing Peter Navarro as coordinator. Americans are rallying behind this leadership, which of course the media hate. So we get headlines like this: stunning poll finds 60% of Americans approve of Trump's coronavirus response. It's only stunning if you see everything, even this national emergency, through the sick, distorted lens of anti-Trump mania. It was the same with the president's leadership this week on ending the total shutdown of our economy. As we put it last Sunday, flatten the curve, not the economy. Here's the president.
America will again and soon be open for business. Very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting. A lot sooner. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself.
You'd think he'd announced a policy of mass murder.
Donald Trump actually said today that if you do not go back to work by Easter, you will kill yourselves. That's what he said. That's the way Donald Trump actually sees this situation. That's the way Donald Trump sees you. Donald Trump does not believe that life is worth living if you lose money.
That is so disgusting. These people are consumed by hatred of Trump.
Yes.
In any case, the president didn't say, go back to work by Easter. He said he wants to see the country back to work as soon as possible. And that if Easter were possible, that would be great. But in the exact same interview, he said he would review it with his task force, which he has. And they announced the outcome today, not Easter, but April the 30th, 2.5 weeks later. The way the Trump haters talk, the president wanting to open up America as quickly as possible, makes him some kind of monster. But you didn't hear a peep out of them when New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the same thing. When New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, the great guru of the global elite, and rabid never-Trumper Brett Stevens said the same thing. When an actual public health expert, Yale preventative health professor David Katz, said the same thing. Or when an actual public health official, the medical director of Maricopa County, Arizona, said the same thing. I've never seen such support for anything we've said on this show as for our message last week, flatten the curve, not the economy. Both parts of that are vital. Flatten the curve so our hospitals aren't overwhelmed, but don't flatten American workers and families in the process. The president understands this because he knows who's hurt by the total shutdown. Not
Okay, it's like he was saying right there. I went ahead and dropped it, Tim. It's like the gentleman was saying right there. You know, it's complete hatred of Trump, which actually kind of leads me into a little bit of a monologue that I wanted to do tonight. See, I had an experience today with a young person on Facebook, and unfortunately, I've come to realize that we have literally poisoned the minds of our younger generation. We have allowed our educational system to teach these kids to keep their minds completely closed, not to ask any questions whatsoever. And that's exactly how they operate. They don't care. They don't stop and ask the questions that my generation of the 80s, we were taught to do that. We'd stop and say, hey, wait a minute. You told us 122 times that you saw evidence the president was a Russian agent. Where's it at? We would have asked those questions. You see, this generation refuses to do so. They do so because they're weak-minded. We've allowed them to become weak. I mean, I recently had an experience where I worked with some millennials, and I would say half of those kids are going to make fine adults. The other half aren't worth the cost of a spent match. They're really not. And they'll never be any good. And they'll never be any good because we've allowed them to become soft. And that's what we've done here. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce my panel this evening. As with me, as always, as you know him, you love him, he's my main man. He owns one heck of a UFO channel. His name is Tim at UFO Man Channel. Tim?
Yeah, hello, everyone.
Fantastic. And tonight, folks, we brought you something very special. We have a very special guest with us. We have a man by the name of Peter Hoover. And Mr. Hoover has 2 master's degrees. Both one is in history and one is in political science. So we thought he'd be a great guest to have on. Peter, would you like to tell us something about yourself, sir?
Well, yeah. As you said, I've got the 2 master's degrees. Also have an undergraduate degree from Syracuse. And on top of that, it's a very eclectic kind of career. I've done a lot of acting in films, small roles, nothing major, television series going from the 1980s. I haven't done TV recently, but, like I said, it's just eclectic, and I'm pretty much retired these days. But I'm looking forward to tonight. I love listening to your show, watching your show regularly, and I'm looking forward to tonight's show with you guys.
Cool.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being here, sir. Well, let's get right to it, folks. One of the things that we wanted to discuss this evening is the fact that America is locked down. Is this lockdown really necessary? And there's different schools of thought on this. But not only is it necessary, but is it an infringement upon our liberties? I mean, are we talking about something that's constitutional here? It seems to me like these regional governors and mayors and people of that nature, they have an awful lot of power suddenly. Okay, they have the power to close and open whatever they see fit, including gun stores in California. They're closing gun stores, but they'll keep the marijuana stores open. Okay, not that I don't approve of that. I'm just saying that's marijuana is not a right. Tim?
In Nevada, I have a friend in Nevada, and he said all the dispensaries are closed now.
Are they? Okay, finally.
They can't even get medical marijuana.
Really? Okay.
I didn't even know it was legal in Nevada. That's news to me, but okay.
About a year now, I think.
Yeah.
2019, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the problem that we have here. I mean, right now we're completely locked down, and we've got half of the aisle. We've got the Democrats in Congress that are running around out there screaming that the president is responsible for people's deaths, that he hasn't done enough. Okay? But, I mean, and the problem is these are exactly the same people. And yes, we have the tweets. We know what was said. Okay? That as soon as Trump actually came out and restricted travel from China, they came out and called him a racist. And this is part of his xenophobic agenda and all that. And again, we know that happened. But the leftist Democrats, they don't want to hear it. They want to omit that, just like they want to remove statues and things like that. That's their game. That's their aim. That's what they want to do. If they don't like it, it must not be true. It just didn't happen, right?
Right. They want to dismantle our country as we used to have it. They want it their way. And if they don't get it their way, they throw a tantrum.
Correct. Peter, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, here I am right now. We do have a curfew. It's from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. And I I do have issues with that, but on the other side, there's two sides here.
Mm-hmm.
I do actually constitutionally think it's an infringement on my right to free travel and everything. But there's nothing out there right now. Everything's closed. Everything's closed because of the virus. I mean, the only things that are open are grocery stores, but they close at 8 o'clock now. There's no 24 hours anymore. Even many of the restaurants have stopped the takeout because they're not getting any business. No one's traveling. Right. On the other side of the coin, I come from I'm thinking of my father's generation, and I look at two different terms, free and freedom. And I was always taught growing up that freedom is not free. There is a price to pay. Right. And we're coming down now to this issue of constitutional rights and everything. Now, shall I venture into this whole thing about the church services now, or do you want to wait on that?
No, please go right ahead.
Okay, so let's talk about what's happening in New York City right now. De Blasio has gone ahead and he's threatening to shut down churches because they have, and close the buildings down because they held church services. Now, let's just look at, I got my Constitution right here, and let's look at what the First Amendment says. Let me just read it really briefly. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And that goes on to talk about the freedom of speech and everything. But in terms of religion, constitutionally, they can't prohibit it. And that's why they haven't made any laws about it. But technically, there was a pastor down in Florida that got arrested today because his mega church did hold a service. It was down in the Tampa area. And they held a service, and the sheriff's deputies went in and arrested him today. Now, as an evangelical Christian, let me just simply say right now, I don't have an issue with the churches closing down. I would have an issue if the government told them to. But the churches are doing it voluntarily because they understand they don't want their congregationalists to be getting sick and everything. I mean, my pastor does a sermon online every week now. I'm fine with that. I have no problems. I mean, if this pastor down in Florida were really going to do the right thing, he would have read the verse in the Bible that says, "Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's." That basically means obey what the government does. The government isn't coming in there and saying you can't hold services. I mean, you can still hold services, but you do it online. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem. There hasn't been any laws, really. I mean, they claim in Tampa there was an executive order which stops all this assembly of people, of large congregations and everything. And that's what he was arrested for. I don't think it's going to hold up in court, frankly. I really don't. I think they're going to have to drop the charges. Now, what he should have done, he should not have held the services, because the bottom line is, if the government's giving us a strong warning, it's for our own good in this case. I don't always trust the government, but in this one, I'm going to, and I haven't left my house in a long time. I really haven't. I've got a compromised immune system. I live alone, so there are times I'm going to have to leave. But trust me, I've got my bandana, I've got my latex gloves. I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing what I have to, and so are the churches. They are voluntarily not holding services, or not being told by the government not to. Mm-hmm. They're pulling back. They're doing the right thing. That's my take.
And that's a huge difference. It really is. And I agree with you. I think that we need to take a real serious look at this point at social gatherings and how many people are, that we're stacking on top of each other. A church would be a wonderful place to spread a disease, because you've got a lot of people in very close proximity to each other for several hours at a time. It's like an aircraft. I mean, an aircraft would even be worse. You're inside of a pressurized tube, breathing the same air as a couple hundred other people, But I get that. And I think that's, I don't know. Tim, what is your take on the whole church thing?
The church thing, like he said, I agree with Peter. If they do it online, it is an appropriate response to COVID-19, because in church, you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with your parishioners, and it's not a good thing during the virus. So to do it online is my take on it. Yes. What I was also going to add was, do I feel that they're violating our constitutional rights? Oh, yeah, I do. I almost think that now I know this is kind of a subject of difference of opinion, but I believe that they're actually instigating a little bit of martial law in this country without actually stating that it's martial law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're talking about the situation I'm in right now under curfew and everything?
Curfew, taking your ability to go to the store at night. You know, closing the stores at night is ridiculous. And the reason why I say that is this. Why would they cram a bunch of people into the store between 8 in the morning and 8 at night? Because everybody's going to rush to get off work and go to that store and get what they need. Well, what's that going to do? That's going to put people closer to each other because there's going to be so many people inside that store. So if they would have left it open 24 hours, then the people that didn't need to shop during the day could shop during the night. And when I personally have gone to like Walmart at night, it's dead. There's nobody there. So then your social distancing is applied and you can stay safe. But now
it's funny. It's funny because Walmart claims the reason they're closing early is so their employees can do a thorough restocking of the shelves. But I've gone to Walmart in the middle of the night and they're stocking the shelves anyways. There's nobody in there.
Exactly. But because of the panic buy, they were hit pretty hard.
Right.
So I do agree for the temporary shutdown of the 24 hours, but not for a permanent shutdown, because they need to go back to the 24-hour schedule so that people aren't so close to each other when they shop, because that is a real risk.
Well, make no mistake. I mean, if I've been through 5 hurricanes, okay, and other disasters and stuff. So I've seen what it looks like when the supermarkets are cleared out, things of that nature. I've actually witnessed this. But what we saw this time with this coronavirus and this whole big panic buy that happened is that we actually saw what the limit of our supply chain is in this country. We just saw what the end of it is, and we've been there. I mean, I walked into my local Walmart, this was a couple of weeks ago, and you couldn't buy bread. You couldn't buy like basic staples. We're talking about eggs. We're talking about flour, sugar. I mean, and forget about toilet paper. You know, those are the things that went first. And again, that was a panic buy. The supermarket CEOs are all coming out now saying, you know, that they're resupplying, they're restocking shelves, things of that nature. Nobody needs to continue to panic. But I mean, it's just I've never seen anything like this. I mean, none of us have in our lifetimes in this country. I mean, that much of a strain on our supply chain was unbelievable.
Some of the smaller stores, and I'm talking like the family-owned mom and pop shops, they are the ones that really got affected because they have limited stocking anyways. During normal shopping and stocking procedures, you know, they don't get a shipment that often. So it's the big box stores that are really getting restocked. It's the little mom and pop shops that pretty much have been affected. A lot of them have probably closed down because of it.
My take on this is that, you know, I look at the big box stores like Walmart, Target, and whatnot, and I'm putting the blame on them as well. You know, you've got a mentality with the public right now. They're going out and they're hoarding everything. And when they hoard things, then the prices go up. I mean, I went online to look for a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and it was $20 for a 32-ounce bottle that normally at Dollar General costs a couple of bucks. You know, that's what's going on. So, and and this is all about greed. It's greed on the part of the American public, and it's greed on the part of corporate America. Because if Walmart had done the right thing, they would have actually rationed what people could have bought. If they weren't so eager to make that buck every minute of the day, if they could have just held back, and they could have said, "Okay, you're only entitled to 4 cans of vegetables. You're only entitled to one package of toilet paper," and if they'd done that, then nothing like this would have happened. But they didn't. I mean, and it's still going on. No stores are rationing what people can buy, so that everybody has a chance to get it.
And they're price gouging. Yes, they are. I know that there are some restrictions on price gouging that were levied by Trump and his administration, but I don't know if all of them have been followed up on.
Right.
I do know at Walmart, I can get a 32-ounce bottle of rubbing alcohol for like $3. So
where you live, you can right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Gee, you'll send some down to me. I make my own hand sanitizer now, you know. That's the only way I can do it.
Right.
That's the one thing we can't get is hand sanitizer. That's sold out.
you know,
you can make your own. That's easy. You just get your isopropyl alcohol and you fill up a little pump bottle at 70% and another 30%. Put in aloe vera gel and then shake it up, and you got your hand sanitizer.
right.
Wow.
You know, I saw a very interesting post today on Facebook, and it was it looked like an immigrant woman, and she was returning a shopping cart full of toilet paper to Walmart today. And I think we're going to see a lot more. And Walmart's actually preparing for this. Rumor has it that they're going to, like certain toiletries and things like that, or even a lot of other products, they're going to refuse returns on because they don't want to run the risk of, bringing a contaminated product back into the environment. And I don't blame them.
Right. No, I understand that too.
If you were dumb enough to go out and buy 1,400 rolls of toilet paper, guess what? Build a fort out of them because you own them now.
What I'd like to know is, are the stockers wearing gloves or masks?
Yeah.
Because if they cough on something that they're putting on the shelf, then they're spreading the virus if they have it, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you bring it home, you're bringing it home to your children, and you're unaware. So that is a big issue. But
I
gotta
it's
point
funny.
out. Sorry.
I'm sorry. The only store I know that's doing anything preventative. I mean, actually, I'm not a big fan of Walmart, but Walmart actually, when you walk into my Walmart, they have the hand sanitizer wipes right there when you walk in, so you can wash down. I wear the latex gloves, but no other grocery store down here in the South. I mean, whether it's Kroger or Ingles or whatever, they don't do it. And that's my concern exactly. What if the people aren't using gloves, the employees? People, and plus other customers coughing on the products. They're not using gloves or anything else either. It's not fun. It's kind of scary.
They should almost mandate, and I hate to say this, but they should almost mandate during the virus to use the mask when you shop, because then if you cough into your mask, and even though particulates can still escape your mask, they're not going to necessarily get far enough to hit a product. So what I'm saying to you is, wear a mask, wear gloves, do the wiping.
I've always been one, even the best of times, when I walk into a supermarket, I grab those wipes and I wipe off the basket or the shopping cart or whatever I'm going to use, because, who knows where those people have been that have had their hands on it. So I've always been big about that. I'm always a big hand washer too, though. I mean, if I go out of the house and I come back in, like laundromat or whatever, wherever I go, I wash my hands. I always think that was a good practice. And as a result, I'm not sick very often. But let's go ahead and talk about the response. I'm sorry, Tim?
Before you do that, I have to go to the chat for a second.
Okay.
A friend of ours by the name of Cuvit said even the big stores over here in the United Kingdom or in England are really low on most stuff.
Sure.
And so other countries are being affected by the panic buy as well. And then Paranormal Underworld said in the chat, he said, if rubbing alcohol is $20, why is gas per gallon so cheap? And I would have to say, well, that's a different subject altogether. That's the war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. So actually that benefits us during this time. But what's weird about that, Jax? Even if you can get a full tank of gas, there's nowhere to go because they're all closed down. So, and plus they're telling you to stay home. So what's the point? Buster Rose says everyone's staying home worldwide, no one driving much, so gas demand has dropped drastically. You are correct, sir. Yep. You are correct.
Yep. I paid $1.17 a gallon today.
Wow. Yeah, it's been a lot of years since I've done that. Jesus.
I don't think I've seen that since I was probably 10? No.
I'm going back to the early '80s when after the whole Iran hostage thing took place and they were cutting off our oil.
1981. That was when the hostage was. Yeah.
No, it was 79. Actually, they took the hostages in 79. They were released on the day Reagan was inaugurated into the presidency. So yeah, but I remember the day they were kidnapped because it was my mom's birthday, November 4th, 1979.
Wow.
And I remember talking about it all the time on the news.
Yeah.
When are we going to go down there and get them out?
Yeah. Boy, that was a bad one.
On the federal government's part, but in this crisis, I have to say that there has been, after some time of bickering and bellowing between the two sides of the aisle, there has been some progression in helping the United States survive this.
but it came at such a cost. I mean, number one, what we've got here is we've got politicians that took this the first I guess version of this bill, and what did the Democrats do? They loaded it up with all their pet stuff, all the things that they want for their agenda. They were trying to fund Planned Parenthood, things of that nature. Even when it passed, they funded the performing arts, the Kennedy Center, and all of that. I mean, what in the hell does the Kennedy Center funding have to do with people dying in the streets that the Democrats are saying they're dying in piles everywhere? What do they have to do with that? It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's how our government works. They don't care about the citizens. They don't care about, like Democrat politicians. The last thing in the world they care about is the opinion of the Democrat voter. Why? Because they already know their base. They know that no matter what they do, or no matter what they say, and no matter what they tell these people, they're absolutely going to believe it. They're going to line up just like lemmings in lockstep. They're not going to be concerned about anything but looking up the ass of the lemming in front of them. Okay, and that's what they're going to do. They know that the average Democrat voter's vote is already baked into the cake.
Right.
So
Tommy, there might be a lot of Democrats out there right now that used to be a Democrat. You're now.
Oh, there are people waking up.
There might be a lot of Democrats like you who are going to. I mean, and we know that happened in 2016 with the election. We know there were Democrats that voted for Trump. So I believe there's a lot of them out there, and I think if Trump holds firm in this whole thing right now, he can prove to be a true leader. He'll get reelected resoundingly in November.
Well, the problem here is that, I mean, right off the bat, Trump enacts that travel ban from China, and they start up with the racism. See that they're trying to divide this country. Instead of saying that's a good idea, or even we do not approve, what do they have to do? They have to get out there and they have to bring race into it. And that's exactly what Chuck Schumer did. He got out there. Well, it's just it's part of his racist agenda. I mean, we have the tweets. Tim?
Yeah, I was going to say this. I was going back to the chat for a second. In regards to what Peter was saying about churches, Mr. D.B. Cooper in the chat said, God will hear your prayers from home. It's about safety, not a constitutional right. Corona doesn't care who you are. It's the most logical thing to do. And I would have to say that I agree with him.
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Yep.
Thanks for your comment, D.B. Cooper. Really appreciate it. Then Buster Rose said, you can still go outside, but go fishing or anything you want. Just stay a distance from others you don't know. So maybe if you take the necessary precautions, have a taser with you or something. I don't know. I'm just saying you could keep a distance from people,
Well, here in Georgia, we got very liberal gun rights, so we can take a gun with us in a holster. So we're all set there,
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, that was just a joke, guys. Anyways,
well,
I think
the one thing I wanted to mention with all the stuff that was talking about in Congress and everything, the one thing that's not been discussed at all by Democrats, by Republicans, by Trump, by Pelosi, by Schumer, or anybody, and that's what this whole thing is going to do to the national debt.
Mm-hmm.
That might be another show you want to do, because I could go off on that for a long time. There's a lot of things to deal with on the debt, but this is not a good thing for us in many ways, and it could backfire because China buys a lot of our debt, and we end up paying interest back over to them again. And another topic we might want to bring up at another time is, what does the world do to China to punish them for what they've done to every country right now?
Well, we can talk about that now.
Yeah, I think we can cut them off personally, not have any economic ties with them whatsoever, because I know that would affect our farmers and that would affect a lot of companies in the U.S. But as long as we start making products here in the U.S. and as long as we start relying on the grain and products from farmers to stay here in the U.S. rather than selling it and shipping it overseas, we'll be all right.
Up until about 45 years ago, we didn't trade with China.
Right. They were a minor player.
They were nothing. And there were only two things happened. When Mao Zedong died and Deng Xiaoping came to power in China, he really liberalized the economics of China. They still have a very politically totalitarian government, but economically they opened up the markets. And when you don't have freedom politically, but you have it economically. That causes a lot of corruption, and this is what happened here with COVID. Now, but they're not talking about the debt, and this could backfire on us because we're adding what? This is what they say, $2.2 trillion package they put together.
I have to say something about that. In
Okay.
that speech that Trump gave about the 2.2 trillion, he actually came out and said 6.2 trillion. So what I'm going to say is, where'd the other 4 trillion go?
Well, it's up to 6.5 trillion or whatever. If there's more and available in this bill, if it's necessary, I think is what he was getting at.
Yes, Peter, it's gone up to 6.2 trillion.
Right,
I didn't hear that speech.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Well, I mean, it can go that high, is what they're saying. But you're absolutely right, Peter. Money doesn't come from the sky. Money, you cannot create money out of the air. You cannot print your way out of a problem. And sadly, I'm afraid that that's what we've done here. We've taken this should have been a laser focused bill on the matter at hand. No fluff, no bullshit, anything like that in this bill. And that's not what happened. The Republicans and the Democrats, they're both guilty. They put a bunch of fluff and a bunch of pork into this bill that didn't need to be there because, as Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago and a Democrat, once said, don't ever let a good tragedy go to waste. And they haven't.
Yeah. He didn't just say it way back when. He just said it recently, and we had it in our last live stream. He came out and said it again. Mm-hmm. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, because when you have a crisis, you can bury a lot of pork into a bill.
That's the mentality.
Yeah,
that's the mentality of the U.S. government right there. That's what the problem is.
That's why the first stimulus bill was held up, because of all the pork, all the BS that was stuck.
Abortion rights, illegal immigrants, DACA kids and their rights, and
some of them were legit, but some were not. And threw a wrench into it.
And speaking of that, you've got the radical left on the Democrat side. They are up in arms because illegal immigrants aren't receiving payments, for this relief fund. They're not going to get any of those, and they are, like AOC, up in arms about that. I mean,
right.
Every time, I tell you what, anytime I ever broke the law and got caught, they put me in jail and punished me.
Yeah, well, they don't.
I didn't get shit.
People who are of the far left, they just don't do that. No,
right.
It's absolutely crazy. It really is. They, this whole idea. Well, don't get me on the illegal immigrant thing. I just, to me, it's a major problem that we're even paying anything when they come here illegally. That they can get the Section 8 housing, they can get welfare, they can get food stamps, all that stuff. SSI even, I'm sure eventually. But it's bad.
They want to give it to them now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, God bless Donald Trump. The one thing I read today in the news was that even though a lot of the economy slowed down, that wall is still being built at full speed right now. They're still building that wall at full speed. So kudos to those guys down there on the border.
Funding's already been appropriated for that project, and you bet. Yeah, there's no lack of money for that. Anything that you needed money for, like on a regular basis, is probably closed down. In fact, I read today that they're actually closing most of the IRS, including most of the agents, and they're telling them do not report to work. So, I mean, our country is effectively, gentlemen, shut down at this point.
So how would you file taxes then? I know they have a 3-month tax forgiveness plan in place.
June or July, I think it is, something like that. Yeah.
Still, how are we going to file taxes? How are we going to afford to pay for this stimulus bill? I mean, like you said in your past live stream, Tommy, this stimulus bill is kind of going to come back to haunt our children's children. It's just it's the way it is, because the $2 trillion actually isn't enough.
No, it's not.
It sounds like it is, but it isn't, because I was talking to some people the other day. That $1,200 payment that they're sending to people that make $99,000 or less, and I think that's a restriction that should be lifted, because I think it should go to everyone, not just certain people. The thing about it is $1,200 enough to get people by? No,
absolutely not.
It should be $1,200 a month for 12 months, maybe 2 years, and that would help. But that would make your stimulus bill probably 4 times as large as it is now.
That check and another $25, and I can pay my rent for 1 month. So you're right. Now, you have to understand that, I mean, the economy is so dinged so badly right now that a lot of restaurants are closing, things like a lot of small businesses or whatever. And this isn't just going to be the kind of thing we just flip on the lights one day and everything comes back to life. I think we're probably looking at a couple of bad years here. I really do.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that because they talked about the V curve with the economy. We're gonna go back and come back really fast. I don't believe that for a minute. I just don't. I think it's gonna be more like a U, more like a U.
Yeah,
curve.
exactly.
I don't know if it'll be a year or two, Tommy, but I it's going to be longer than what Trump is saying right now. Mm-hmm. And even if we get back to work by June 1st, which is what his goal is, it's going to take a while for the economy to come back up and running. We were hit hard by this. I mean, this has been, and let's not forget these restaurants and these small businesses, which make up 66% of our economy, not the big box stores, but our economy is based on 66% mom and pop. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these places are going to shut down because they don't have the funds and the money. And they're going to go bankrupt.
33 to 40% have probably shut down already.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying in the state of Minnesota, that a lot of the small mom and pops are gone now.
My favorite restaurant right here in town. I live in a very small Georgia town, and it's a Mexican restaurant. It's right down the road from me. I mean, I live in a rural area, but it's a couple of miles down the road. I get in my truck, head on down there. You can go in there, you can get a beverage, you can get your food. Not anymore. And so when I walked in there last week, they told me they're only doing takeout, and I don't like doing takeout at all. But then the next day I felt guilty because they're so good to me, So I went out and got the takeout. It's not as good as sitting down and having a meal at the restaurant, but it was still good food. And I live alone. I don't like to cook for myself. I always cook too much, and the dogs eat better than I do after that, because there's so much leftover food. I go to a restaurant, I order exactly what I want, and I'll eat it all. But I really want to help these businesses out, but there's only so much we're going to be able to do with the travel restrictions, with everything closing down early. I mean, there's not a lot you can do.
Let's venture back into one of your points that you were making a little while ago there, Peter. Let's talk about China. Let's talk about this. You have to understand that. Let's go back to the Russians interfering with the election. Okay, the Russians didn't interfere with the election per se. What they did was they used social media platforms to interfere with the weak-minded individuals and our young, which is what they did. And it's exactly what the Chinese are doing now. Now, if we come out and we say it's the China virus, well, that's somehow racist. And you had a White House reporter, I don't know her name, from MSNBC, young lady, and she did everything she could possibly do other than outright call the president a racist. They have to make this a race thing. They have to make it it's got to be a racial thing. It's got to be a gender thing. It's got to be an LGBT thing. It has to always be something to keep people outraged. And that's what the Democrat voter out there, or at least the vast majority of them, haven't figured out. All they're doing, all the media is doing, is leading you where they want you to go. They keep you outraged. That's how they keep control of you. And when that outrage is over or starting to peter out, what are they going to do? The Democrats in Congress will simply pivot to the very next outrage, and the media will propagate that.
Tommy, let me just add to that one thing. I think it was a CNN reporter, and it was a different reporter because you mentioned the one you're referring to was a female. This one was a male, and when Trump referred to COVID-19 as being a Chinese virus, this reporter turned around and asked him flat out, "Don't you think that's a very racist term to use?" And right. Trump got pissed on it, and Trump, he gave it right back to that guy. The next day, there was a reporter from OAN, One American Network, which is a conservative. Yeah. It doesn't rival Fox necessarily, but it's there, it's out there. And she turned around and she asked a great question, which shut the liberals up. And that was, Mr. President, do you think that the term Chinese food is a racist term, saying that it comes from China? And Trump's sitting there trying to hold it back. And he said, no, I don't think it's a racist term. I don't think Chinese food is a racist term. But I thought that was just a fantastic question to ask.
Food and Thai food and all the other ones.
Right. Well, okay, let's look at it. Okay, the Spanish flu. Was the Spanish flu considered racist? No, nobody's ever said that. And it's the times that we live in, and it's just the example another example of what we've done to our children through our educational system. And let's go ahead and sashay into that. Excuse me. What we've done here is we've taught our kids in our educational system to hate and to judge under the guise of being politically correct, under the guise of acceptance. In other words, be accepting to anybody that thinks exactly the way that you do. Because if they don't, then they're to be, ostracized from the community. They're to be, boycott, their business being boycotted. They should be fired from their jobs. Right. Yeah.
And let me just say, I'm a former school teacher. I taught for 12, 13 years, but I did not teach in public schools. I taught for one semester. I filled in because I speak fluent Spanish. I filled in for a Spanish teacher that was pregnant, and they needed somebody to cover the classes till the end of the year. So I did. And I hated it. I hated the public schools. I applied, and I took a lower salary for it, but I applied to private schools. And private schools, in those days, they didn't pay as much as the public schools did. My first year's salary as a private school teacher was $7,168.
Wow.
But it was a boarding school. So I lived on campus. I could eat at the dining hall for free. I didn't pay any utilities. I didn't have to drive back and forth to work. So that was pretty much disposable income, except for my $75 a month student loan and $10 a month phone bill. That was back in the early 80s, but and my kids today, my former students are friends with me on Facebook. They remember the classes I taught. They are very conservative. Not all of them. Some of them went to the dark side, but they are very, and we're very good friends to this day. We still have political discussions. They love my classes. And that's very flattering to know years later after I've retired from teaching. It's great to know that. But, I couldn't teach in a public school because of exactly what you're talking about. Even back in the early 80s, they were teaching kids, the mantra under what was considered politically correct. And being politically correct is nothing more than a form of censorship. And that goes against the U.S. Constitution. So.
Right.
Barack Obama.
The speech is limited.
Yeah, Barack Obama propagated all of this, and I blame him, not exclusively, but I blame him big time. I mean, basically, Barack Obama hit the scene.
Hold on a second. What is that, Peter?
Something going on here.
What?
I can hear us coming through the speaker.
I don't hear anything.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, Barack Obama got elected and said, I'm going to bring this country together. I'm going to bring this country together. Well, it's pretty hard to do that when you say, yeah, I'm going to bring all these people together, except you're gay, you're straight, you're black, you're white, you're this, you're that, and actually putting a label on every single American. It's not the way to bring us together, okay?
Peter, do me a favor. Drop out for a second and then come back.
How do I do that?
I think Tommy can do it.
Okay.
Oops,
he dropped himself off.
Wait a minute.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
You tell me when you did that, there was no echo between me and Peter.
Yeah, I know. It's something on my end, but I can't imagine what it would be. Let me drop out.
Okay. Anyways, going back to the show, what I wanted to say is I don't think that what is being told by the media is actually the truth. Totally. I think they're being dictated to. And Trump is also over glorifying the numbers being in his favor. There is some legitimacy to what he's saying, but there's also legitimacy to the negative stats as well. And I heard today that the death toll in the United States is somewhere between 2,500 and 3,200 people already. And that's significant from the other day. And that was like 2 days ago, we reported it was around 1,200. So it's really jumped. Mm-hmm. So we need to really take our preventative measures and do what we can as individuals to use common sense, because this is the Common Sense Network. And you need to take common sense and use it. And if you're not using it, you're going to put yourself and others in jeopardy.
Right. You're going to do something stupid like give up rights that you already have, which you don't want to do. And that's the thing. It's liberal hypocrisy. These kids, I just don't get it. I mean, they refuse to ask any questions. Now, I can understand someone that's in their 70s and they've been living this way for, and thinking this way all of their lives. And that's sad that you can't reach those people. I have some of those people in my life. But that being said, when you see a young person that's in the same boat, it's like, don't you understand that you're being manipulated? Don't you ever stop to look around and ask any questions? And they don't. They don't because they're brainwashed.
Right.
Yeah, and I can only speak to, my experience is teaching. That one semester I taught in the public school system in Connecticut, I just did not, I couldn't handle it. And I was a lot younger then. We're talking 40 years ago. I was a grad student at that time, and I was teaching during the day, going to class at night. And even back then, I just thought there is something not right about this. And it wasn't the same. And I was a product of the public school system. And I never felt that I was being manipulated by my teachers back then. I graduated high school in 1975, I never felt I had nothing but great respect for my teachers. And I was not raised liberal by my parents. The teachers did not instruct in any kind of political correctness. We had great history teachers, great economics teachers. They were good. But what had changed that was from 1975 when I graduated until I taught one semester and I didn't teach in my hometown. It was it was a city about 50 miles away. But what a difference that was to me. I just said, this is not the public schools I remember. And that's what prompted me to take a lower salary and work at private boarding schools.
Mm-hmm. Right. I had a sister who was a teacher in a private parochial school for years, but she wasn't making the money, and she went to public schools instead. But what she noticed about public schools is they changed how they represent the curriculum for kids. It's completely changed, and it's more dictated toward the far left viewpoint. And they're accepting things into the classroom like no cursive, for instance, or eliminating prayer. Say you are an evangelical Christian like Peter. Don't you want the freedom of religion, which is a constitutional right, isn't it? So why don't we protect that? Everything's been changed. So my sister then left the public school and went back to private because private schools seem to do a better job of honoring both the Constitution and the correct curriculum to better our kids.
Yeah.
To better
children. And
not indoctrination centers.
And let me just add to this one thing. As I taught history, I taught political science, taught economics, and let me just simply say that in teaching history, let's take an example in public school. If you're teaching Roman history, ancient Roman Empire in public school, you can't mention Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ was centrally involved in the Roman Empire in terms of his ministry, in terms of the crucifixion, the resurrection. He's part of it, and yet you couldn't mention that.
Oh, no,
I had no problems in private school with that. I could talk freely about Jesus and any other religious leader I wanted to as a course of history. But try doing that in public school, you're going to do 20 years hard labor with a cellmate named Bubba. I'm telling you, they're going to come after you for that.
Considered a sin, believe it or not.
What?
Christianity is considered a sin now.
Yeah, but it's okay. Islam's just fine. Islam is just fine.
Oh, yeah. Dry law everywhere. Yeah.
To getting back to our young, in their defense, in their favor, excuse me, they weren't there, or they weren't around for 9/11. They don't remember that happening. They weren't around for Waco and the Branch Davidians. They weren't around for what Ruby Ridge. Okay,
right.
And here's the sad thing. I guarantee you, in this leftist curriculum that we're teaching these kids, they've never heard of any of those places. I probably just said things to them. They went, "Huh? What's that?" Because
if they have heard of it, they've been taught not to believe it.
Right. They've been taught to trust the government no matter what. Don't ask any questions. Just walk straight in lockstep and just do what we tell you. And they're going to do it. They're going to do it. They're not going to ask questions. And you know, I grew up in the 80s. I'm like the very upper end of Generation X. And I'm not saying that, you know, we were super idealistic, but I mean, damn, two things. Number one, we would ask questions. And second, I never doubted for a moment that my generation either couldn't or wouldn't defend this country if called upon.
You know, the problem right now is in schools, public schools. I'm not going to talk about private schools because each private school is unto itself. But in public schools, they don't teach civics anymore. They don't teach government, and they don't teach history. But what they do is they have this conglomeration course, which is very politically correct, and they call it social studies. And you know, I never heard of that term until I became a teacher, and I heard it in the public school system. That, you know, I was raised with history courses, economics, civics, or government. That's what we were taught. We were actually taught the Constitution.
Sure.
And all these kids today, all these millennials today, including my daughter, quite frankly, I hate to say that. I'm sure she's not watching this because she's an ultra liberal. But my daughter, who lives in Montana, you know, she has no idea of the Constitution, yet she'll talk about her rights. You know, our rights are spelled out in the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. And, you know, people think they have a right to vote. There is no right to vote. Right. It just so happens that the federal Constitution outlines the conditions for voting, and all 50 states in their constitutions have echoed that. So there is this perception that they have a right to vote, and there isn't. I mean, we'll go into that later on, but people do not know their rights because they do not know the Constitution, because they weren't taught civics in high school or grade school.
That's true. That's true.
Or they were, they didn't pay attention.
No, right. It's not even in the curriculum.
Pay attention. So,
yeah. Okay, Tim, you got a Hannity video up here. You want me to roll that, or?
I went back to the other one. Let me go back to the Hannity one. Okay, I could do
whichever one you want to roll, man. It's up to you.
I'll do the Hannity one, and this is how China and the World Health Organization could have prevented the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Hannity. Okay, here we go. It should play.
And perhaps, hopefully, game-changing news tonight. The red tape has been cut. The FDA is acting. The president is acting, all at unprecedented speed. And America's top scientists, medical researchers, doctors are now working around the clock on new major breakthrough ways to treat the coronavirus, actually using medicines that are FDA approved and already in use. We have these incredible details coming up tonight. 3 separate areas we're working on right now. And we're also in the midst of a major worldwide pandemic. Sadly, this full-blown global crisis might have been prevented or at least mitigated if not for the corrupt actions of the communist Chinese government. According to this top study from a British university, 95% of all coronavirus cases may have in fact been prevented if China didn't try to hide and cover up this deadly disease at every important moment. And as the president indicated earlier today, he's been saying it really more loudly than anyone else I can think of. China cannot be trusted. Take a look.
Absolutely.
Reported for the first time since the outbreak, no new cases over a 24-hour period. Do you have any reason to disbelieve them?
As far as believing what they're putting out now, I hope it's true. Who knows? But I hope it's true. I really do.
Are you thinking about any types of repercussions for China? And are you also rethinking sort of the supply lines for our manufacturing industry?
I don't want to comment on that right now.
Sadly, we can't trust anything coming from China's government. So here are the facts. As early as December, high-ranking Chinese officials, they actually silenced the doctors on the front lines and the journalists, if you even can say they have journalists, they don't have freedom of the press, who bravely tried to tell the truth to the entire world, give the important information, vital information to the world about the coronavirus. Now, many of those doctors who put their lives at risk, they are dead. They died trying to save others in their country and worldwide. And on January 18th, when the disease was rapidly spreading in the Wuhan province of China, well, the city hosted a massive potluck dinner with tens of thousands of attendees. It's incomprehensible how dumb that is. It wasn't until January 20th, after the virus already spread all over the world.
Oops, sorry. Hold on. Hate that.
That China actually admitted the disease was contagious person to person. Now, the 21st of January, we had our first known case here. The 31st, 10 days later, that was the travel ban. I'm getting to that in a second. This is the kind of botched, Chernobyl-like cover-up, sadly predictable for communist governments. Doesn't mean we shouldn't get along with them, but we need to know that they're hostile actors. They didn't act alone. The World Health Organization, everybody needs to know this. They are a corrupt and frankly useless organization, not unlike the United Nations from my perspective. They were supposed to be an organization the world could trust. Instead, they've been doing is spreading Chinese Communist Party propaganda from day one. They haven't done any independent fact-checking, and they deserve blame for this, as does China. Look at this, January 14th. That's late in the game by this point. World Health Organization tweets, quote, Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the virus. If they had any sense, they would have known that's not true. They'd done their own research. They would have known in 5 minutes that's not true. Now, WHO's director and general-in-chief is a pretty sketchy individual. No medical training. He's been carrying China's water for months on this. A brand new report in the Hill tonight. He turned a blind eye to what has happened in Wuhan and the rest of China after meeting with President Xi in January. And, quote, from the outset, he defended China despite its gross mismanagement of the highly contagious disease, even suggesting that the president's travel ban to and from China was racist. That one decision, history will bear this out. 10 days after the first identified case in this country, January 21st, first case, January 31st, travel.
Remember that.
That one decision did more to protect the health and lives of American citizens than any one thing that has happened. Thousands more Americans have contracted this virus, and it is incalculable how many more Americans would have died exponentially. We would have been in a far worse position than we are now.
You know, it's typical, and it's just like the government, just like what we're doing to our kids. And I even have a friend in Italy that's buying into this. China has a propaganda machine aimed at the United States of America right now, trying to pin this virus on us somehow for some way. And they're doing that by going around to the rest of the world and kissing their asses and providing them with supplies like Italy, places like that. Oh, by the way, we helped you out, the Americans didn't. Well, that's all well and fine. But the Chinese, once again, have unleashed a plague upon the planet. I mean, take SARS 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Okay? That became an epidemic before they said a damn word. They kept their mouth shut, just like they did with this one, because of their secretive nature about them and all that. Like anybody really gives a shit about them. But their secretive nature has kept their mouth shut again, and now we have a global pandemic. Should China be held accountable for this financially? Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely, they should. Well, we have to find a way to do this.
I want to echo something on this, and I think I've had a lot of arguments with people about how do we get China to be held accountable. Now, there was discussion, I know that even Trump brought it up, that what we would do is suspend the interest we pay on the debt that they bought from us. Can't do that. It cannot be done. Because what happens is our debt, first of all, as far as the United States goes, our U.S. Treasury bonds, which is where our debt is pretty much stored, is the safest investment in the world. It is considered that way the world over. And you can't target one country and say we're not going to pay interest to you, because that's going to be what's called a sovereign default. That alone, even if you could target one country, and it doesn't work that way. If you default on the Treasury bond interest payments, you default on them, whether you're trying to target a country or not, which you can't. And three major countries, I mean, Brazil, Japan, and China own our debt. I mean, but they only own about 38% of our debt. The rest of it's owned by the U.S. government and by us, people like you and me who may have 401ks. Trust me, I bet you your 401k has debt. They purchased the debt by U.S. Treasury bonds. So if you default on the U.S. Treasury bonds, not only do you affect Americans, It's going to affect the interest rates. Are going to go sky high. The value of the dollar plummets. So that's not an option. People don't understand that. They simply say, don't pay China interest. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's scary because I don't know how we do it. I really don't know how you do it, other than Tim, what you said was, let's pull back and not trade with them. That's how you do it. You bring their economy down that way without affect. Well, it might affect ours in the long term, but you would still, you go back to the way it was 40 or 45 years ago when we didn't trade with China back then.
All that grain that we ship overseas, why don't we use it to feed our own people?
Yeah, because because we produce more than we consume. But I mean, and that's why we always fed the Russians back in the day and all that, because we just, the bottom line is we produce way more grain and foodstuffs than we actually consume. But, I mean, should China, there's got to be a penance here somehow. There's got to be a penance for this. And not just us. I'm not just speaking in terms of the United States. I'm speaking in terms of the world.
Well, let me tell you the one thing we could do is, in my opinion, is if you really want to have penance in China, you keep the trade barriers up. I know Americans don't want to hear that, but what that's doing, it's slowing down their economy. Seriously. I mean, that's what you do. You keep the trade barriers up. You keep the tariffs up. That's how you do it in the short term anyway. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't done enough research to understand how that would work in the long term. But in the short term, it's really affected their economy. And they don't want that. So you could do it that way, at least for now. Lawsuits, I do know that with health issues, international law applies. I do know that. The question is, when you've got a government like the Chinese government that lies to their teeth, has a propaganda machine, won't tell the truth about anything regarding this virus, and still blaming the U.S. for it, blaming the U.S. military for it, what do you do? Right. I mean, it's really, I sometimes throw my hands in the air and say, what the hell? It's crazy.
What do you do if you're an American? You call it racist because somebody said it was a Chinese virus. That's what you do.
If you're a liberal American.
The non-Chinese food restaurant.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What are we going to call it now? Pretty soon, one of these days, we are going to politically correct our society to the point to where it's just going to be nothing but a bunch of us standing out in the desert on one leg naked, jumping around. Okay.
Yeah, but not paying interest on the debt, and that's what you call a sovereign default. And you look at every country that has violated, who has not paid interest on their debt. Brazil is a classic case of it. I mean, their economy went spiraling downwards. So for the world to think of our U.S. Treasury bonds as the safest investment world over, bar none, for us to default on that would mean serious shit globally, and it would be very, very bad for Americans because we own a lot of our own debt.
I don't think our country is going to take that step. I really do not believe that.
I don't think they will either. They'd be stupid to.
Let's do that against China. I understand their rhetoric is just, a lot of people are pissed off at China. Let's just say it. Come on. They released something on the world that is killing a lot of people and still continue to kill more.
And members of our own Congress are out there saying that if we call it what it is, if we speak the truth and call it a virus from China, a Chinese virus, that is racist. And they're also saying that Chinese Americans all over the country are being assaulted and discriminated against and all that. And my answer to that is, show me the police reports. Show me the police reports.
Yeah,
I want to see them.
That's not a false flag. That's false media reporting. Right. Don't believe it. And if it is happening, go up to your Chinese worker that you see and tell them, hey, we're supporting you. You're part of our economy. Hey.
I want to just say one thing, and I don't know, Tommy, if you saw it on my Facebook page or not, but I made a post a few days back saying, I think it was on Friday I made the post. I was so fed up with hearing Cuomo's daily bloviating for an hour. I just made a comment. Now it's all I made a comment about was Cuomo. I didn't say anything else. And then an old time friend, I say friend, I use that term loosely because I haven't seen him since 1968 or whatever. But we used to grow up in the same neighborhood, and he's a Facebook friend, evidently, clearly a liberal. And he came after me. He said, I don't understand how you can support Trump. I didn't bring Trump up in the post. Mm-hmm. And then he started making accusations about Trump. I go into teacher mode then. I said to him, Jack, as a teacher, when my students wrote term papers, when they stated something, they had to back it up with facts supported by examples, period. What are your facts And what are the examples supporting those facts? He said, well, Peter, I'm not your student. I said, yeah, but this is my Facebook page. So it's my playground and my rules. And if you're going to post something stupid like what you posted, you better have facts to back it up. Yeah. Everybody came on and supported me for that. Yeah, I mean, everyone came on.
I went after it.
People complain and they say, well, okay. Then I say is bring up the specific facts.
They don't have facts. That you ask them to do that, and they don't. All they do is accuse, and they don't have anything to back up their accusations. We've seen that all over the place with the Russians.
It's over in New York. He's always complaining about not having enough ventilators, and yet we found recently there's a warehouse in New Jersey that has over 350,000 ventilators that were shipped to him by the federal government, and he has yet to lay claim to them.
Right.
So if he's not using them, that's his own fault.
Do you know what you know what his excuse? You know what his excuse was when he was challenged on that today? You know what he said? We're preparing for the apex of the virus, meaning when it peaks. That's when he thinks he's going to need them.
All those people that die on the way to the apex of the actual virus don't matter, is what he's saying. And the thing about Cuomo is, and this is the way I picture him. You picture a family, they're sitting down for dinner, and they distribute the food evenly out to all the kids. And one kid says, hey, I didn't get as much as my brother. Well, that's Cuomo saying, I didn't get as much ventilators as the rest of the country, which is a bunch of hooey. He's been getting the ventilators that he needs. It has been delivered. And I know 350,000 isn't enough for the city of New York, and I'm sure they need more. But 350,000 is a start, and he should lay claim to them and use it now, not wait until the apex. That's stupid.
Right.
I couldn't agree more.
Here's the thing. Ventilator is just yet the latest liberal outrage buzzword. Okay. Just like AR-15, just like obstruction, it's that word that they put out there and they drill into the liberals' head, into their mind. And they know that once it gets in there, it's not coming out. And that's what ventilator is. Look, most of the people that come down to contract coronavirus are not going to need a ventilator. And the fact of the matter is they probably have more than they need now. But because the media got a hold of this and ventilators, the word of the time of the day, or whatever you want to call it, that's why we keep continuing hearing about ventilators and all that crap. So listen,
or masks with respirators,
or masks, or masks is the same way. Anyway, fellas, listen, I think we're going to go ahead and wind it down. Let's go out to the chat real quick. Folks in the chat, we'd like to appreciate you guys coming out. Does anybody have any questions or anything before we sign off for the evening?
Hey, Cubit, I want to thank you for coming. I know you signed off. I will next time send you a link so that you can participate in our panel. That would be great. He expressed interest tonight, but I wasn't able to do it fast enough. DB Cooper, thank you very much for coming and participating. Really appreciate it. And Paranormal Underworld, as always, thanks, Jax. Really appreciate you being here.
Jax. And of course, we want to give a special shout out and thank you to Peter Hoover for being here with us tonight.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it, guys. It was wonderful.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job.
Could I say one thing also?
Sure.
If anybody wants a copy of this, they can email me and I'll send it. It's a PDF file. But Tommy or Tim, I can't remember which one of you guys mentioned it, but you talked about the Spanish flu of 1918. And there's an excellent book by John Barry, which I actually have in a PDF file. And if you're a book reader, read this book because it'll give you a lot of insight to what's going on right now with COVID-19. It's a good history of the flu and what happened, with all the returning soldiers from World War I and what happened after that. Just a fascinating book for those of you who are historically inclined or want to learn more about how viruses work. This is a book to read. So my email, if I can mention my email address, I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
It's peterhoover@gmail.com. It's pretty simple. And if you email me and just put in the great influenza in the subject line, I'll email you the PDF copy.
Cool.
Fantastic.
That sounds great.
Appreciate that.
If we can, Tommy, maybe you can put it in a link down below your video when you post it.
I'll do that.
I want to thank you too, Peter. It was very nice interviewing you and having you here. I hope to see you in future live streams. You're very knowledgeable, and it made the stream much more enjoyable. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And just let me know anytime you need me. I'll be here for you guys. I love your show.
Thank you very much. We truly appreciate that. So listen, folks, while you're here, do us a big favor. Run on out to UFO Man channel. Go ahead and subscribe to his channel. Those subs would mean a lot to us. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button on my channel as well. We really appreciate that. And again, folks, we really appreciate everybody coming by. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. And hopefully we'll come back a better people after it's over.
Yes.
So thanks again, everybody.
Americans always do.
That's
yes.
right.
We always come back better and stronger.
We always rise to the occasion.
That's right.
So stay strong, stay safe, and thanks for coming.
God bless everybody. Take care.
Stay healthy and safe, everybody. And thanks again.